Hello and happy New Year's Day. That's right, it's here. Bowl Mania in full effect. Hans Heiser, this is Bud Light's prediction amongst friends. Thank you so much for being with us. Hope everybody had a great start to their year and what's going to be one of the biggest days of college football in quite some time, especially here in SEC's country. So we'll break it down. Let's not waste any time. Let's jump out right now on our via satellite. Alex Martin Smith down at the Marriott in New Orleans getting ready for the Sugar Bowl. Happy New Year, brother.
Yeah, Happy New Year, Hans. I wish I could say I was coming to you from tropical New Orleans, but it is very cold here.
Yeah, when you say very cold, what are we dealing with here?
Well, actually, I don't know if it's as cold as Atlanta right now, but dealing in the 30s, which running around town last night, I think was detrimental to many people's causes.
Well, you know, down in Miami the other night, everybody was freaking out in the Orange Bowl because it was 61 degrees. Mark Richt was doing a little bit of freaking out in his own. I've seen him get a little fiery before, but grabbing an official, I've never seen him do that before. And I think Georgia fans maybe wanted a little bit more of that in his tenure here with the Dogs.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit, it's not just the one call or two calls or whatever. There's frustration building up when something like that happens. And entertainment value's high, but not a good look for Mark.
No, it's a tough way for them to end the season. I think the schedule and the injuries finally caught up to them. But nevertheless, a 10-win season for Coach Richt. You got to think that they're going to continue to get things turned around down there in Miami. Real quick, before we get to today's New Year's Day action, do remind everybody, be a part of our show on Facebook Live. We'll get to some of your comments here in just a moment. But real quick, before we break down the three games, not the college football playoff semifinals, we'll get to the Outback, the Citrus, and the Peach Bowl here in just a sec. Talk a little bit about the SEC's bowl performances overall. You and I last did the show. Missouri came up a little bit short offensively. They really struggled. But your thoughts on Mississippi State winning with a makeshift coaching staff, of course, no quarterback. Texas A&M coming up a little bit short. And then to me, Kentucky, that was just kind of like a microcosm of their whole season. One play away there at the end. Just your thoughts on those three games, Alex.
Yeah, Missouri was the only one that was, I think, really disappointing, where we expected them to play at a much different level than they did. But Mississippi State, that was a very nice surprise. I really thought Lamar Jackson was just going to toy with them all day, and he had a lot of big plays. You look at that 80, 90-yard run or whatever he had in the first half. His typical impressive self, but it's really, I was surprised by how well Mississippi State was able to move the ball, even though Louisville's defense isn't that great. But they rallied. Their coaching staff is in a little bit of an iffy situation, to say the least, at least for the bowl game. And I was very impressed by what they were able to put together, and especially Keaton Thompson on the ground for them. 3 touchdowns, I think 147 yards from the quarterback position. And I think definitely something the SEC can hang its hat on, that win. And today, it's really all about today, Hans. I mean, you got 5 games, all of them featuring SEC teams. So this is really the make or break day.
Yeah, if you're Texas A&M, you're Jimbo Fisher. You got to like what you saw out of Starkle. Looks like they've got an answer there at quarterback. Defense, they got to figure some things out. But, they hung in there with Wake Forest, tough loss there. And then Kentucky, of course, going for 2, which was the right call, in my opinion. Coach Stoops at the end of the game. But, they were just unable to get anything going on the ground that day. Of course, Benny Snell gets ejected in a bizarre situation early on in that ball game. But Kentucky just one play away. You're talking about 3 plays, one against Florida, one against Ole Miss, and, of course, the one we just talked about against Northwestern, where all of a sudden they're a 10-3 football team. I'm not saying they're a great team, but those are 3 plays that really could have changed the outcome of their season.
Yeah, I think so, and especially you go back to the Florida game and leaving 2 receivers wide open and being unable to end that curse. That's really, I think, the story of their season there was against Florida. But I look at bowl games as long as you show up and you play well enough where you're in it in the fourth quarter. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You lose by a couple points. It's still something where you can say you showed up, you played a solid game against another Power 5 team, and there's not a heck of a lot more you can ask for that in what is basically an exhibition game.
All right, it's time to get it going here in our Bud Light prediction amongst friends. Do want to remind you and your buddies all season long, tailgate with some ice cold Bud Light, and they'll be playing that going down in Florida for the Outback Bowl today, a rematch of a game from 2013, Alex, between 2 teams that really like to grind it out. that have been offensively challenged all season long, Michigan and South Carolina. Both teams coming in at 8-4, and Brandon Peters going to get the start. He got knocked out of that game against Wisconsin late in the year, and you see Jake Bentley there at the bottom, Alex. You know, early on in the season, now Deebo Samuel had a lot to do with that, but he's kind of struggled throwing the football here down the stretch for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, that's true. And, first of all, look at these graphics, Hans. Those are beautiful.
Are you kidding me? These guys haven't been home to see their wives or families in months. Poor Michael's got a beard behind there. He looks like one of the Game of Thrones characters.
It's worth it. It's all worth it. Going back to Bentley, yes, the Gamecocks' passing offense has been less than stellar. They don't come up with a lot of big plays. But I'm honestly more concerned about Michigan's passing offense. I think people talking about them, they say, oh, Brandon Peters, he's showing a little bit of life and whatever. And, I mean, compared to the guys who really couldn't get anything going for them, O'Korn and Spate, for most of the season, Peters had, one game, 2 games where he showed some good flashes there, but I saw that offense in person in November against Minnesota. They could run against that defense, but passing-wise, it just doesn't seem to be there, and I don't think this is a good matchup for Michigan's passing offense against South Carolina, which has been fairly consistent on defense this season.
You know, the number on this game, Alex, is a little bit surprising. It was sitting at 7.5, 8 points. It's up to 9.5. I looked at it right before we went on the air, telling me folks are putting on some serious money on Michigan. I don't know if Michigan can beat anybody by 9.5 points, but I do know one thing. They're going to run the football. You talked about, Peters and the lack of passing attack. Well, Michigan, I think Jim Harbaugh knows that. I think they're just going to line up and they're going to try to just pound the rock all game long. And, I think South Carolina's defense is good, but I don't know that they're stout enough up front to be able to limit that Michigan ground game. I like Michigan in this game. I think that, we saw how good Wisconsin was the other night as they took care of Miami relatively easily in that second half. And obviously Michigan took them down to the wire, a couple plays either way. And, I like Michigan in this game. You sound like you're on the other side.
Yeah, I think so. And I think Michigan's rushing offense, they're going to find some success. They're going to get them into that 14, 21-point range. The question is, can USC respond and put together some scoring drives? And I think they can. I think there's going to be enough there. Kurt Roper's out. Brian McClendon's been promoted. And I think you need a little bit of a spark right now. Even if McClendon's pretty unproven, he's more of a running guy. You just want to try something because the Gamecocks offense really has not been there. You could argue since Deebo Samuel went out in September. So I think they are going to get a few scoring drives in. I think Bentley is going to play one of the better games he's had this season, which doesn't say a heck of a lot, but I think he's going to be solid, and I think South Carolina is going to pull the upset.
I tell you what, SEC Country's glad to hear that. What a season it would be for South Carolina if they go 9-4 and then find a way to get back on the winning track, in bowl season. It'd be incredible. So that's our Bud Light prediction amongst friends there on the Outback Bowl. Now, right here in Atlanta, we got a football game that's going to kick off here in less than an hour. The Auburn Tigers against UCF, the darling of college football this year, of course, a non-Power 5 representative in the big game. And, they've gotten there with offense, Alex. It's no surprise. I mean, Milton is an offensive machine, but let's be honest here. They really haven't played any kind of defense all season long, much less a defense like the Auburn Tigers.
No, they haven't. But I think it would be unwise to underestimate what Milton can do to this Auburn defense. I think they can surprise Auburn, especially through the air. Milton is a dual threat guy, but they have found success in just about every single game they've played this year, and I don't think there's enough credit for that UCF offense and what they've been able to accomplish. Now, to your point, Auburn's defense, one of the best in the country, just shut down Alabama a month ago and shut down Georgia for the better part of 3 quarters. So I think Auburn certainly has an advantage, but for the sake of entertainment, I hope UCF can sling it around a little bit as they've shown all season.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think if Obviously, I'd like to see Auburn win as an SEC football fan, but I think it'd be good for football for Central Florida to show up. The whole story with Scott Frost and, sticking around to be with his kids and what's been a special year. And you and I were talking earlier in the week, if somehow they win this game and they end up 13-0, they're going to get some votes in the AP and the coaches poll, and rightfully so, because this would be the true test. We know Auburn beat two #1 teams. So the only thing I think that could stop Auburn in a game like this is if you come in flat and you're not motivated. I don't know that I've seen a Gus Malzahn team do that. I expected to come in focused and prepared, and I just think to a man, Central Florida's not going to be able to score on them the way they have, throughout this season. You saw that defensive number, 987 yards passing and 8 touchdowns they've allowed defensively in the last 2 games. I expect Jarrett Stidham to have a huge day. Give me the Auburn Tigers in this one. Big. I'll throw a score at you, Alex. 56-28, doubling up UCF.
I like the way you're going. I think I agree with most of what you are saying. And I will say, we talked about the season-ending AP poll and where UCF might land, but think about also the implications of a UCF win here, especially a big win, for potentially how the committee decides the playoff field moving forward. If you're sitting here with an undefeated UCF at the end of the year, that's in that 4 to 5 range in the final AP poll, I think that does change a little bit of the philosophy for the committee moving forward. But I've got Auburn today. I don't know about 56-28, but I'll give them a 31-17. How about that?
Okay, that's fine. I had to go shock jock today. I haven't gone shock jock in a while. This was an opportunity. I felt I could have slid that in there. All right, so there's our 2 Bud Light prediction amongst friends for those 2 games. Also going down today, I think you can make an argument that this might be the 3rd most interesting college bowl game, at least to me. LSU, Notre Dame, 2 schools sitting there at 9-3. And I think the winner of this game, Alex, tell me if you disagree with this. Obviously, it's going to set them up well going into next year. But I think you can deem this season, whoever wins this game, a successful campaign in what's supposed to be a rebuilding year for LSU. Or the loser, whoever loses this game, you could make an argument that, you know what, things didn't go the way they were supposed to do, and this season was a failure for both of these teams in this game.
Yeah, I think if you look back at the preseason expectations, a Notre Dame win here would probably be a little bigger than LSU. I think, if you go back to the conversation of who was going to challenge Alabama, number 1 was going to be Auburn, and number 2, in a lot of people's eyes, was not going to be Georgia, but it was going to be LSU. And can they be a top 10 team and compete for the playoff? And I think in the month since they lost to Troy, certainly this is a big deal for them, finishing strong and winning this game. But going back and being relative to the August expectations, I still don't think a win today gets LSU where people wanted them to be in August. More so, I think a win for Notre Dame would really cap a strong season for them and put them about that number 10 spot, exceeding some people's expectations at least.
I early on in the season, I didn't like what I was seeing offensively from LSU. Heck, I don't think anybody did outside of what they did to BYU, but that was more of a defensive standout performance for them. Lately, offensively, they really have things cooking. Etlin's been very accurate with the football. Chalk's been making big plays down the field, but I think the reason for that is Darius Geis. This guy's finally healthy. Offensively, LSU, they've been putting up great numbers. I expect them to do that again today against Notre Dame. I don't know that Notre Dame can match them. The only thing that gives me a little bit of a pause for concern if you're LSU today is they're not missing 1, who's Arden Key, probably a top 5 pick, without question their best pass rusher. Not 2, 3 of their starting linebackers are not playing in this game against a Notre Dame team who likes to get it to the running backs in space in the passing game, and they've been known to run the football with both their running back and their quarterback. That would give me a little bit of concern if I was LSU today.
Yeah, and you mentioned that LSU, they've been hot on offense, over the past, 3-4 games or whatever it's been. And looking over to Notre Dame, it's been a little bit of the opposite, where that really powerful running game has disappeared a little bit. And when they fall behind, they're not the best passing team. I think Brandon Wimbush still has a lot to prove there. But if they can get the ball rolling on the ground, Josh Adams is really tough to stop, and Wimbush is really tough to stop when he leaves the pocket or when he's on a designed run. So I think the key for LSU is you hold back that Notre Dame rushing offense, and it's going to be gravy from there, because I think the Tigers can take control of this game, and once they get a lead, I think it's over for Notre Dame.
Yeah, I agree. I like LSU in this game. I think they put up quite a bit of points against Notre Dame. I'll throw a score out there. Give me 31-17. LSU, as the SEC gets a much-needed win here in bowl season. Who you like, Alex?
I like LSU, and then I'll go with a 23-13. I think a little bit more of a defensive battle there.
All right, that's our Bud Light prediction amongst friends. Do want to tell you, there's one thing all fans can rally around, and that is tailgating with ice-cold Bud Light. That's what we've been doing all season long. Terry Crews on our text message thread, he said Auburn, if they beat UCF, will have knocked off 3 undefeated powerhouse teams this year. Of course, you got Alabama, Georgia, and Central Florida, so that's an interesting aspect to it. All right, now here we go, man. This is it. This is what we've been kind of getting at all season long since we started this thing back in late August, Alex, and that's the college football semifinals. I think they got it right. I think the 4 best teams are in there. Ohio State did look very impressive, but I think if you're arguing Alabama, Ohio State, they made the right decision. So here we are, 2 epic matchups. We'll break down the Sugar Bowl last where you are, but first we got to get to the Rose Bowl. Bring up the graphics. There we go. Nick Chubb and company heading out to Pasadena, taking on Baker Mayfield. And what is the first time that these schools have ever played one another. That in itself, in California, in the Rose Bowl, is can't-miss TV just by itself.
Yeah, and I think this is the bowl game that a lot of people are looking at as the #1 game that they want to watch this weekend, especially. It's such a unique game. You look at the matchup; it's never happened. You look at the fact that Georgia hasn't been to the Rose Bowl since World War II. I just think this is going to be a really special game to watch. And then it's a little bit of an experiment. You've got one of the best offenses of all time in Oklahoma, at least statistically, and a stout Georgia defense and a better all-around Georgia team. But is this the moment for the Big 12 to finally break out with one of the greatest players in conference history, maybe one of the best college football quarterbacks ever? Baker Mayfield can really prove that status today if he goes out and hangs 403 touchdowns on Georgia. So I think all eyes are going to be squarely on Baker. Can he make those plays he's been making in every single game he's played this year? Or is this where the buck stops and is the big bad SEC defense going to shut him down? So I'm very, very much excited for that. Get the popcorn ready, all that. I think this is the premier game of the weekend.
I think if Georgia can keep 7 in the box and they can limit Oklahoma's running attack. They average over 200 yards a game. And make them one-dimensional, have to throw the football more than they'd like to. Short, not big 50-yard plays down the field, but short passing games, incrementally, by passing the ball, take some clock away. And Georgia obviously running the ball, keeping the ball away from Baker Mayfield. If they can do that, if they can play with 7 in the box, I think it sets up tremendously well for Georgia because I think offensively, Jake Fromm, if it's there in the passing game, I think he can make plays, but I just don't see how Oklahoma's going to stop Georgia's running attack. I know that they've had time to prepare, but I just don't know that they're going to have the ability, the talent to be able to slow down Georgia's rushing attack. And if that's the case, it's going to be a long, long day regardless of who's under center for the other side.
Absolutely. That if Oklahoma is able to really shut down that Georgia running game, I'll be shocked. And I think what Oklahoma fans have to root for here is a little bit of chaos, a little bit of a shootout situation where maybe the Sooners can get on the board a few times in the first half, and while they won't necessarily be able to play strong defense against this Georgia offense, potentially force Georgia into having to throw the ball into some crucial passing situations. I think Jake Fromm can come through in those situations, but the Georgia fans would rather not see him have to try to do that. So I don't see this really being a blowout in favor of Oklahoma really in any situation, but it can swing Georgia's way in a really big way if this defense for the Bulldogs is really too much for Baker Mayfield to handle. So I am definitely on the side of Georgia here. I think they're going to run the ball with ease, and their defense is going to, end enough Oklahoma drives where this doesn't turn into a shootout situation.
Let's talk about the Georgia defense briefly. Roquan Smith, arguably the best defensive player regarded by many in the country, going up against a guy who likes to play backyard football, extend plays with his feet. What kind of role do you see Roquan playing today? Do you see a little bit of spying, a little bit dropping in coverage? They like to blitz him just to kind of keep him coming from all different angles, confusing Baker Mayfield?
He's just such a good player that I think you need him to be involved in as many plays as possible and get into the ball as many plays as possible. So I don't know how cute they're going to get with it. I think a little bit of it, there's going to be an element of surprise, as there will be whenever you're taking on a top offense. You're going to show them something that they haven't seen on film this year. But I would probably lean toward a more traditional approach, specifically with what they're going to do with Roquan, because you really don't want to overthink it when you have a player who's as amazing as Roquan Smith is.
If Fromm's got to throw the ball 25 times today, can Georgia hang in there with him?
I think so, and that's the big question, right? If it does get into that situation where Fromm has to throw a lot, that's where we hit peak entertainment. Because if Georgia's season's on the line and you got a true freshman trying to make plays, and we've seen him make plays this year, we know he can do it. It would just make for some really good television. I'm not convinced it's going to get to that point, though.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go on the record. Everybody's saying that if it's a shootout, that's not what Georgia wants. Georgia can't win the game. Well, let me tell you something. Vegas says the total's 61.5. Okay? So they're usually right around the right. And they also say that Georgia's favored by 3 points now. I think it is a shootout, and I think Fromm has a huge day. I think everybody has a huge day, and I think Georgia wins the game 35-31. Give me the Dogs in this in what's been a tremendously special season for them, and they advance to come home and play in the national championship next week in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Give me the Dogs 35-31.
Yeah, I love what Baker Mayfield has been able to do this year, but I think this is going to be another disappointing day, akin to Oklahoma's big loss in the playoff a couple seasons ago. I got Georgia 38-17. I think Georgia's going to get those points, but a lot of that is going to be driven on the ground, and Oklahoma's not going to have an answer.
There we go. That's our Bud Light prediction amongst friends on the Rose Bowl. Do you want to tell you huddle up with your friends and some ice cold Bud Light, the beer that's famous amongst friends all day, all game long. Sugar Bowl time, brother. You're down there right now, man. So what's the vibe? What's the feel like? What's the split as far as fan bases go? What's your general feel for the game?
When I was first here a couple nights ago, I just saw a lot more, Clemson fans than Alabama fans. It's anecdotal. It's not really indicative of how many are here overall, but Clemson fans are certainly here in full force. It's a longer trip for them, but this is a chance. I think this fan base for Clemson is a little bit more invigorated at this point. There's just a little bit more on the line for a program that really was not elite for so long. And now you have a chance to win 2 consecutive national titles. You get a chance to knock off Alabama for 2 consecutive games, which few programs have done since Nick Saban showed up in Tuscaloosa. So I would say there's a little more energy from the Clemson side, but certainly a ton of Alabama fans here, both sides in full force, and I think the Superdome is going to be very, very loud tonight.
Clemson, when Dabo Swinney took the job, a lot of people thought he wasn't the guy. He has not only exceeded expectations, he has changed the way that these young coaches go about recruiting, about delegating, coordinators. He's, I don't want to say revolutionary, but he's really changed the way guys go after it now. And the amount of success he's had speaks for itself, but I think a win in this game just puts him up there in rare air when you're talking about, I don't want to say level with Nick Saban, but nobody else is really in that conversation outside of maybe an Urban Meyer.
Yeah, and you could argue moving forward, 2017, 2018, this sort of smaller bubble of time. Yeah, you could argue that Swinney's doing a better job than Saban if he wins this game. But, also I don't think, any coach in the next couple decades is going to reach the level of success that Nick Saban has. But, Swinney's a Hall of Famer. I mean, you talk about 2 consecutive national title appearances and 3 consecutive college football playoff appearances, and basically creating this golden era for Clemson out of thin air. He has done such a good job, and his team, it's one thing to make it to the playoff, but it's another to be considered a team that can knock off Alabama, that deserves to win those types of games. And it's been impressive how quickly he has changed the narrative for his program.
Kelly Bryant, Jalen Hurts, one guy's been there, the other guy hasn't. How big of a difference does that make in this game?
I think these offenses are very similar to each other, and are going to be hamstrung by some of the same things. Neither Bryant nor Hurts does great in obvious passing situations. These are run-heavy teams with quarterbacks that are constantly looking to run, and that's going to be the big difference for Alabama fans watching Kelly Bryant this year. Is he's not Deshaun Watson, where Watson is more of a pass. More of a passer who's going to wait another couple second or two or buy more time to throw. Bryant is looking for lanes to run. So if that Alabama pass rush leaves him gaps, he is definitely going to exploit those, and I think that's the big difference you'll see from Deshaun Watson the last couple of years. But on the flip side of that, he is not Deshaun Watson, across the board. And Deshaun's an all-time great player, franchise NFL quarterback, and Kelly Bryant still has a long way to go. So much in the same way that Jalen Hurts doesn't necessarily inspire a lot of confidence when it's 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12. Kelly Bryant is really in the same boat, and I think this is a game for one of those guys to prove that they're maybe a cut above what people list them at the moment, and give them individually some momentum going into 2018 if you're talking about the Heisman conversation, right, or which team is going to have the edge next year.
And, both of these guys like to make plays with their feet. Both of these guys typically don't go up against defenses like this each and every week. I think when the play breaks down and they go to cross that line of scrimmage, they're going to be, I don't want to say thinking twice, but they're going to be looking over their shoulder, because both of these defenses are incredible. Both of them top 5 nationally in total defense. Don't forget, Alabama is still number 1 in total defense. You can make an argument that their schedules weren't exactly the same, but don't for 1 second sleep on that Alabama defense, even though they're without 2 starters. It's prediction time. We've already said that we both agree that Georgia's going to be on one side of the bracket. Who do you got coming out of this one on the other side, and why, Alex?
I think both these offenses are going to struggle tonight, and it's really a question of which defense is going to be more dominant. I don't think the Clemson defense is going to have much trouble with the Alabama offense. I think it's going to be much the same as that Auburn game was for Bama, where it just became really frustrating against that front seven. But in a little bit of a twist here, I do think the Alabama defense is going to give Clemson more trouble than their counterparts. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game, a hard-fought game, but I think that the Alabama defense is going to rise to the occasion a little bit higher than that Clemson defense does. I hope we get an all-time great game, a close game, but I do think Alabama's going to pull it out. It's so hard to beat them 2 times in a row, and with a month of preparation, I wouldn't want to go up against Nick Saban.
Cherokee Lee Black on our Facebook Live page says Alabama by 12. She goes on to explain why, but that's funny because that's exactly what I have. I have Alabama 24, Clemson 12 in this game. I just think that, like you said, it's tough to beat those guys 2 times in a row, and I do think it's a low-scoring game. But we thought that the last 2 times these teams played. But the difference is there's no Deshaun Watson, and I think Alabama, believe it or not, outside of running back, they're kind of limited at playmaker. I mean, outside of Ridley, I don't know that they have anybody downfield. So I expect low scoring, but I do think Alabama, been there, done that. They get the win, and we got Alabama, Georgia in the national championship game next week. And what we said was a down year for the SEC. So it looks like everything's going to be okay if what you and I say happens.
Yeah, an Alabama-Georgia national title game in the state of Georgia, that's going to go over really well for everyone outside the South, I think, Hans.
It's going to be unbelievable, man. Everybody's fired up here. I know you guys are fired up down in New Orleans. Stay warm, brother. Have a great time at the game tonight. Get there early to the press box. Get you a bite to eat. Watch the Rose Bowl. You should have a pretty special day down in New Orleans. Good to work with you, brother. Happy New Year.
All right, Happy New Year, Hans. Thanks.
There you go. Alex Martin Smith via satellite from the Big Easy. Thanks again to Bud Light. Do want to tell you there's one thing all fans can rally behind. That's tailgating with ice-cold Bud Light. And I'm out of here, man. Thanks to everybody behind the glass. We're going to have stuff for you here on SEC Country all day long with breaking news updates as well as live look-ins to the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl. So stay here all day long. Appreciate you making us part of your day. Happy New Year to everybody out there. Great work behind the glass, and we'll see you